Are you looking for a great visual novel to read? Something as exciting as Fate's Day Night, or something mysterious like Umineko, or something romantic like Son of a Witch? Well, you've come to the right place. Hi, my name is August, and I review anime visual novels. I've covered a lot of them this year, both old and new, and I want to give you my recommendations on which are the best of the best and which ones may pique your interest. How, you may ask? Through a retrospective tier list containing every visual novel I reviewed this year. I'll give you my brief thoughts, any brutal opinions, and my final scores of the title. But if you're interested in learning more, links to their individual reviews are in the description down below. We've done this before, and this year is no different. And stay till the very end as you'll see my award winners for Best Romance, Horror, Mystery, and my all-time personal favorite visual novel of the year. You are free to agree or disagree, but if you have any differing opinions, I would love to hear it. And with that said, let's begin. First on the list is the final send-off to a beloved series. For the epilogue story chapter of the Chuny Superpower action series, 9 was released this year. And for fans, it's quite satisfying. 9 new episode is the formal conclusion to the series, wrapping up the last bit of leftover plot details. There's some nice all-ages slice-of-life moments featuring all the girls for some fan service, and the ending is actually pretty sentimental at the very end. A pretty neat thing about this installment is that it explains some of the motivations of a particular villain in the series, something that was lacking in episode 4. I found myself very content with how this series finished, and this was just a nice bow on top. 9 new episode gets a B from me. Next up is Akatsuki no Goei, a visual novel where the absolute worst bodyguard is tasked with protecting the most prestigious high-class ladies. Written by Shogo Kinagasa, the author behind Meteor World Actor and the popular light novel series Class from the Elite, Akatsuki no Goei has all of Kinagasa's familiar writing quirks. A powerhouse main character hiding his true power, the harsh yet playful banter between the cast, and very nicely drawn heroines from Tomoe Shinzaku. The problem is that it also contains all of his crippling faults as a writer too, and for this being one of his very first works, it's ugly. There's edgy shock value for the sake of it, lack of narrative focus in his stories, largely unaddressed plot elements, and the worst of all, inconclusive heroine routes. There is potential here with Akatsuki no Goei's ideas, discussing the divide and complications between social classes, and considering this is a trilogy, the series likely gets better with its later releases, but the glaring flaws in here are so bad and problematic. I'm a big fan of Meteor World Actor and Class from the Elite, so I can deal with the author's unique issues, but I can't easily recommend this title alone. Akatsuki no Goei gets a D from me. What I would actually recommend is his other visual novel series, Meteor World Actor, featuring a rebellious detective in an urban fantasy city where the sun doesn't shine. It's got the same similar issues, but it's an extremely entertaining read. And it's also my personal favorite visual novel in my 2021 tier list video too. Now here's a visual novel that takes drama to the next level. For our main character has the ability to invoke special powers into his own voice, including the power to manipulate people to his whims and desires. The only exception being one special girl that is unable to be controlled. Amatsutsumi follows the story of Makoto, a descendant of a god, with the aforementioned power of the Kotodama. He decides to visit the outside world and he comes across 3 girls with unique circumstances, so he decides to help them, but his powers might end up causing drastic consequences instead. Amatsutsumi has Makoto go through some pretty conflicting internal issues with how he feels about the girls. This only gets more complicated as he becomes more familiar with their problems and starts developing emotional relationships. Are they genuine human feelings or the self-satisfying whimsical acts of someone with a god complex? One example has Makoto use his powers to convince a girl and her mother that he's a part of their family in order to find a place to stay. But what happens when Makoto starts developing feelings for the girl? That initial bond was merely a fabrication to begin with. Amatsutsumi slowly builds these conflicts up before delivering on some pretty fantastic emotional climaxes, and this further continues until the final heroine of the game. Frankly, what the entire story is dedicated to, along with having impactful illustrations and music. Unfortunately, when Amatsutsumi isn't spending time on its common route, aka the slice of life sections and the heroine after stories, it's very middling. Not that great or compelling, but it's not terrible either. More forgettable if anything. There's also the small fact that the main character can be kind of a man slut, but that's a small issue, I guess. Amatsutsumi gets an A-. If you focus purely on the main story, you're gonna get a pretty satisfying drama romance, one that that also has a pretty jaw-dropping, plot-heavy H-scene too. One that I'm definitely gonna remember for a long time. Next up, Cafe Stella and the Reaper's Butterflies, a romance visual novel with a dash of comedy, drama, and the supernatural. Developed by Ubisoft, a very renowned company known for making visual novels like Riddle Joker, Senran Banka, and Son of a Witch, this title will give you the same wholesome vibes, much like its predecessors. But it's certainly the weakest title in its library. After dying in an unfortunate car accident, our main character is given another chance at life. He just has to work for the Grim Reaper. And along with a fellow university classmate and a royal talking cat, the group begins working together to start a cafe business. I find that Cafe Stella is a much slower, relaxed title. There's a more subdued, realistic charm to this one. No heavy action is involved, just a more grounded aspect in dealing with people's insecurities. Now, full disclaimer, and I can only say this because I've read their previous games, but Cafe Stella takes a lot of inspiration from their previous titles, where you can recognize similar plot beats between the games. The stories in Ubisoft visual novels aren't particularly their strong suit. There's a coined term called the Ubisoft syndrome, where the idea is if you've read one Ubisoft visual novel, you've read them all. But the reason why I'm saying this is because Cafe Stella suffers from a lack of focus, being split across its plot elements, the cafe setting, the supernatural premise, and the heroine stories. And those similar plot beats I mentioned are executed much better in those other games. There's also the fact that this title suffers from the usual ecchi romance shenanigans from Ubisoft, and it stands out more because of this particular visual novel's mood and atmosphere. Cafe Stella and the Reaper's Butterflies gets a low B. It's the weakest among the Ubisoft visual novels, but it's still a Ubisoft visual novel for those devoted fans out there. Also, Natsume and Susune are top tier heroines in my book.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
So for this next title, I want your full attention because Cyanotype Daydream is a fantastic visual novel with some of the best storytelling I've seen all throughout its individual stories, all beautifully connected together, for they are about a guy who met the girl who dreamed the world and how they are fated to never be together. At its core, Cyanotype Daydream is a sci-fi drama romance story, but the way it's structured is through a collection of cases that provide deeper meaning to the overarching romance. Case 1 tells the story of a middle-aged man, a failed writer with a dying marriage, as he meets the daughter of a famous author. Case 2 is about William Shakespeare as he's forced to write plays for a female noble in a 1500 England where females were not permitted to perform on stage. And Case 3 shows a young boy following in his late mother's footsteps to photograph a comet that appears once every 76 years and ends up meeting a female teacher who blackmails him to come back to school. Not only are these compelling premises, but Cyanotype Daydream wants you to see how our lead duos overcome the issues they face, and every conflict is as interesting as the one before it. The solutions to their problems aren't simple. It's often their personal insecurities and the world around them holding them back from achieving their dream. So it's up to the other half of the pair to reassure their partner and support them. Whether it's between a pub bartender and a noble lady, an older woman and a young boy, or even a 45-year-old teacher and his student, it's the bonds that they develop through their struggles that is truly inspiring and romantic. The unique case structure can throw you for a loop, but all of it is meant to get you further invested into the greater mystery at the core of the story. One that also wants to hit you hard with its emotional moments. With its excellent visual presentation and direction, its immersive writing style, and its outstanding soundtrack, Cyanotype Daydream is a great package of a fantastic visual novel experience. Solid S from me. End Aegis was next to the roughest visual novel I've ever read. It's a grim, dark take on the magical girl genre that fuses military science fiction with Eroguro. In terms of its content, it's on the same level as Euphoria and Maggot Baits. And yet, despite all of its horrific, gruesome scenes, it's the best written dark eroge visual novel I've ever read. In this world, women are recruited as magical girls to serve as the first line of defense against alien life forms. However, their powers as magical girls are directly proportionate to their sexual development, where the more pleasure they experience, the stronger they become. And so they have two options: submit under the malicious acts of sexual military training, or die mercilessly in battle. It sounds completely ridiculous, but End Aegis takes it seriously and is very uncompromising. You'll see torturous scenes attacking the cast physically and mentally. It's quite depressing, but these scenes help create a great narrative on the harsh military culture women face and the predatory system that abuses them before throwing them out out when they are no longer needed. And it's how our main characters fight against this oppressive system that ends up becoming Dead End Aegis' most compelling aspect. The story becomes this balancing act to see whether or not its lead characters can overcome every horrific thing the world throws at them for the sake of others, in classic magical girl fashion, bombastic opera soundtrack, and epic fight scenes included. I don't recommend Dead End Aegis for everyone, but if you can bear the rough content and terrible acts of evil, you'll be treated to a fantastic package of a dark eroge visual novel. Dead End Aegis gets an A from me. With this title, I'm gonna be completely upfront about all of this. I hated playing Evenicle 2. Numerous times I questioned why I was playing this game. Between the constant battle encounters, the repetitive map backtracking, abnormal difficulty spikes, the bullshit RNG encounters, and the new disease mechanic that Evenicle 2 introduces that makes the previously mentioned problems worse, I did not have a fun time. And I don't feel like there were any significant gameplay improvements from the first game that made it any better. That said, at its core, it's an Alisoft JRPG with lots of detailed world building and adventurous plot and lovable characters. For a game that allows you to marry multiple wives, it sure loves to give a lot of love to all of its female heroines. Evenicle 2 is a wholesome JRPG about saving the world while having fun with your many wives, so it's got that going for it. If you're a fan of the previous Evenicle or Alisoft JRPGs like Rance and Dona Dona, this one might be worth your time, if you're willing to deal with the issues I mentioned before. It took me a whole year just to finish it, but I eventually came back to see it to its conclusion. The game wasn't for me, and I can fully accept that. Evenicle 2 gets a C. Now, it's not a category, but if there was a category for Best Yuri Visual Novel, 100% I would pick the Flowers series. More specifically, the third volume, The Book of Autumn. Flowers, the volume Sir Autumn, tells the story of Yuzuriha Yashiro, the charismatic and well-beloved president of the St. Angekam Academy. She's quite the standout individual, but not in the way that you think, for this very same girl is hiding a vulnerable heart, desperately struggling to hide her feelings for her best friend in an environment that doesn't allow that love to blossom. By following Yuzuriha, we gradually learn about her desperate situation. She may be sociable and friendly, but those glimpses of subtle expressions reveal a deeper image of her conflicted feelings of self-identity and her changing relationships. Yuzuriha is idolized as this jokingly eccentric yet dependable upperclassman, but there's a difference between what people perceive her to be versus what she actually wants to be, and how it all connects together with her childhood friend, a very gentle and virtuous Catholic girl, ends up becoming a lot more complex and messy. The visual novel's presentation as a whole, the visuals, the audio, and the writing all serve to highlight Yuzuriha's nuanced feelings. Everything from her soft, hidden muttering in her voice, the deliberate, calculated responses to the people around her, to the introspective ways she views herself. And Flowers' poetic prose does a fantastic job at conveying those emotions, giving it an elevated sense of drama and atmosphere. Altogether, it's a great package of an intimate Yuri character-driven story, all thanks to Innocent Grey. That said, the mystery aspects still remain to be the weakest parts of the series, and certain relationship dynamics can rub people the wrong way. But for those specifically looking for something like this installment of Flowers is a fantastic recommendation. A definite personal favorite of mine. Flowers, the volume Sir Autumn gets an S from me. But that's not the end of it, as the final climactic installment of the Flowers series, The Book of Winter, was finally released this year. And so our characters arrive at the answer of a 4-volume long mystery, the disappearance of a long-lost love, and the tragedies surrounding it. Flowers, the volume Sir Hiver, or The Book of Winter, focuses back on our primary main character, Suo Shirahane. She's come quite far from the shy, timid, and socially awkward girl she was in the first volume, but through sheer dedication and willpower, she was able to change herself in order to solve the mystery of her love's disappearance. The Book of Winter takes a much more serious approach to its mystery, and as a result, the atmosphere feels a lot heavier. Don't worry, there are still some cute slice of life moments sprinkled in there, it's just that this solemn and melancholy tone hangs over the volume as a whole. On the plus side, this laser-focused direction and its refined prose is great at building suspense and elevating its emotional drama. However, there are some controversial aspects to it. Again, this volume feels heavier compared to the ones before it, and how the story conveys its narrative and presentation implies a much darker, grave situation surrounding the mystery. mystery. I find that this oppressive tone largely clashes with Flowers' overall environment. Relaxing, delicate, gentle, youthful, and a lot happier. Some particular scenes stray away from this, almost feeling ominous at times. It shouldn't come across as overwhelming. There are also questionable behaviors from certain characters that end up souring our perspective of them. The worst aspect of this is that their motivations are left inferred and implied instead of being fully explained. But despite all that, Flowers still delivers a great intimate story about these adolescent girls learning to love each other and themselves in the process. This volume is a fitting end to the series, even if it stumbled a little bit, and I'm willing to forgive it. Flowers stands as my favorite Yuri series to date, and I would highly recommend this to anyone looking for a more drama-oriented Yuri series. Flowers, the volume Sir Hiver, gets an A from me. And now, time for something completely different. A visual novel featuring a cannibalistic clown monster with the body of a machine and the mouth of a devil. Someone with undying loyalty towards his user Yuka, a young girl with the face of an angel and the soul of a demon. He's quite the iconic figure. Gore Screaming Show is a wild, psychological horror thriller filled with chaotic delusions and pure gore fests. You'll be taken on these weird psychedelic trips, seeing giant floating eyeballs, graphic disformed body sprites, and horrifyingly gruesome bad endings. It is, after all, by the same person who directed Sadistic Blood and End Aegis, visual novels equally full of messed up scenarios. And yet, this visual novel is actually much deeper than what it lets on, as it's also a character-driven coming-of-age romance. Gore Screaming Show features our main character Kyoji as he returns back to his hometown. Everything's changed from when he last saw the town as a child, and that includes his old relationships. We see Kyoji try to reconnect back with his friends, and possibly go out with some of the girls. At least, if the madly in love yandere Yuka didn't have anything to say about it, as she sends her cannibalistic clown after her love rivals. It's a drama about childhood friends coming back together and the unresolved problems that stem from the past, which is then further complicated by the typical awkward emotions you see from young students. Some people may find these traits annoying and frustrating. Kyoji's rash outbursts and Akane's tomboy tsundere stubbornness come to mind, but that's also the point. They're immature people and they have to learn how to grow up. Otherwise, they'll be treated to the worst possible deaths imaginable at the hands of Yuka and Gore. It's set up pretty damn well, because through Yuka and Gore attacking their insecurities, the heroines are forced to come to terms with their traumas and internal struggles. And as a result, makes Kyoji and the heroines mature into much better people and partners. Gore Screaming Show is really effective at being a psychological horror thriller while also having the story to back it up. There are some exceptionally strong concepts and its thematic messages are nicely executed. A high recommendation, given you can stomach and bear through its rough and problematic content. But honestly, you should read it for Gore Screaming Show alone. Gore Screaming Show gets an A from me. And now, after 5 long years, the Grisaia Phantom Trigger series has finally reached its ending climax. And how was it? Pretty alright, I guess. But when you put it into the perspective of a 9-volume long story, that's painfully average. Volume 8 continues where the previous installment left off, with the Mihama students fighting in the ongoing battle against the villains controlling the war. On paper, it sounds thrilling, but it really just feels like an average day, both to the cast and the readers. Not exactly the best impression for a final send-off of the series. I'll give it some points though. There's a neat subplot where we follow an orphan teenager escorting a group of kids stuck in the middle of this war. Practically Dark Souls level difficulty of escort missions. It painfully puts into perspective the desperate struggle it is to survive and the stakes at risk, and the fact that, you know, war is bad. There's even a surprise alternate ending, which is very unorthodox for the series to take, but everything else before it is more or less the same as any other volume before it. To frame the series in a certain light, Grisaia Phantom Trigger is a spin-off narrative set in the Grisaia world about the mercenary lifestyle, and it should be regarded as a spin-off. Not that it's bad, but it's not remarkable, especially considering the very beloved Grisaia name attached to it. Grisaia Phantom Trigger Volume 8 gets a B from me. Hatsumira from the Future Undying tells the story of a Japanese World War II veteran being isekai'd into a fantasy world full of dragons, mermaids, and zombies. It's a compelling premise, and it's got the production to back it up, being developed by the same team that made the Grisaia series. You just gotta get through all the aggressive British English. Bollocks, the enemy's trying to hit your camp. They've gone after the box kickers and slop jockeys. Can't beat all these wankers down with just my fist and make it back in time for brekkie, now can I? So I got my blade back from the lizard missus. They chose the wrong man to pick a fight with. The main character Ichiro is the best part. I haven't seen a visual novel protagonist that couldn't give less of a shit about the situation he's placed in. All of these races are suffering through economic and societal troubles at the fall of a heavily militaristic country, the Whistler Republic. Yukikaze, the royal princess of the dragons, is trying to rebel against them, but her militia isn't strong enough. She attempts to recruit forces from the other races, the dogs, the mermaids, and the dwarves. The only problem is that every race equally hates each other. It's a result of their unique cultural values clashing with one another, but while they're fighting among each other, the Whistler Republic continues to reign over them. Ichiro thinks that this interracial fighting is frankly absurd, so what he does is punch them all into submission. He's a no-nonsense person, and until they come to reason, he's not willing to deal with their crap. So he's gonna have to help them resolve their issues in order to gather information to find a way home, even though all that awaits him is a kamikaze pilot's death. This combination of different cultural races and each individual's unique backgrounds becomes a great foundation for Hatsumira's world building. It even ties in character development as their initial beliefs are challenged and then matured. That said, Hatsumira, despite all of its intricate fantasy world building, is a very hard recommendation, for its unique niche premise might also be a potential barrier. It's not a cutesy romance story or a thought-provoking mystery or a shocking horror title. It's a full-on war story with commentary about the battlefield and its societal consequences. Don't get me wrong, Hatsumira is written well, for its main routes anyway, and there's plenty of thought-provoking aspects to it, but you have to be specifically interested in a work like this to fully enjoy it, along with its anime eccentricities. Hatsumira from the Future Undying gets a high B from me. Hello Lady appears as this rose-colored slice of life, where our main character enters a prestigious academy for superpowered individuals and meets 5 beautiful girls. But Hello Lady's true story is about a bloodthirsty Avenger who seeks to fulfill his oath bathed in blood. This title is largely a plot-driven story. You'll follow Narita as he disguises himself among his classmates and carries out his perfect revenge plot. There's a lot of heavy action set pieces, and how Hello Lady hypes them up between the bombastic orchestral soundtrack and the dramatized writing makes these scenes very dynamic and exciting. Narita himself is also a standout character. Between his flamboyantly pompous attitude, natural charisma, and hidden vengeful bloodlust, he's a very amusing guy to watch. His mission requires him to get closer to the girls, but by doing so, affects his iron will mentality. Hello Lady sure loves to play up those contrary relationships and its morality struggle, as if its direct references to William Shakespeare wasn't obvious enough. The downside is that when the story isn't about Narita, his revenge plot, and its direct consequences to the heroines, aka the slice of life events, Hello Lady is at its weakest. The biggest glaring flaw in particular being Narita's constant sexual harassment. Every time Hello Lady cuts to these comedy bits, I absolutely hate it. The jokes are tiresome, repetitive, and it kills the mood. Hello Lady's true route is also a major problem. It's full of inconsistent motivations, abrupt plot reveals, and bullshit superpower evolutions. Logical consistency went out the window here, and my suspension of disbelief was completely shattered. All because Hello Lady wanted to keep raising the stakes just for the sake of it. To summarize, there are some strong points in Hello Lady between Narita's characterization and action fight scenes, but my god, those faults are so glaringly bad that you can't easily ignore it. Hello Lady gets a low B. Now, if you're looking for a more grim and serious murder mystery, Kara no Shoujo is a series you should definitely check out. For the charm of this visual novel isn't who the culprit is or how the crime was committed, but the somber feelings and emotional grief of those close to the victims. Taking place in a 1950s Japan, Detective Tokasaka Rieji investigates a series of gruesome murders, where young women turn up dead, limbs ripped from their bodies, and wombs torn out. He goes to his younger sister's school to look for clues clues and protect the students. But the most significant reason for his involvement is that this series of murders resembles a case from 6 years ago, the one that took the life of his beloved fiancée. Throughout Reiji's investigation, he's constantly reminded of the past. Regrets like, what could I have done? And if only I was there sooner, frequent his mind. It's not just him. You'll get to see how other people are affected by the murders. The worst part is that Kara no Shoujo will switch the perspective to the murderer and viciously detail how the culprit brutally maims the bodies to really drive that nail in. It's quite excellently depicted, but is not for the faint of heart, as the visual novel forces you to watch. The only salvation for Reiji as the body count continues to rise is a very whimsical and mysterious girl he meets, Toko. He's been hired by Toko to help investigate her past, but he ends up confiding in her instead. Toko isn't Reiji's Watson in the investigation, but she's a like-minded individual that Reiji can go to for some peace of mind, and vice versa. Everyone you meet in Kara no Shoujo has moments of intimate vulnerability, and it allows you to connect more with these characters. The presentation between the soundtrack and the subdued, muted color palette also adds to the realism too. That said, the biggest fault with Kara no Shoujo is that it's terribly difficult without a walkthrough guide. It's very easy to run constantly into bad endings and even harder to get into specific endings, true ending included. Kara no Shoujo also has the problem of having largely unnecessary H scenes. While some scenes emphasize the emotional grief of the characters and show them indulging in physical relationships to help endure the pain, readers may not want to see Reiji hooking up with some of the younger girls. Besides those content warnings, Kara no Shoujo is one to check out if you want a more melancholy, atmospheric mystery that really dives deep into its characters. Kara no Shoujo gets a B. For this next title, to be quite honest, I didn't even look at the premise. All I saw was a pretty cute pink booba and clicked the buy button. Turns out, what I actually got was a full blown out supernatural mystery story, while also getting a cute succubus demon in the process. Kimagure Temptation was certainly unexpected in how dedicated its plot was to its mystery. Following our exorcist main character, he meets up with a succubus named Annalise to help assist him, and together they solve the mysterious deaths of an abandoned complex building. It's nice in how the visual novel has you investigate the crime scenes and talk to the spirits of the deceased. This leads you to explore the unique circumstances leading up to their deaths and the regrets they held. You may be solving a crime, but the emotional moments drive the story and its characters. Now, when they aren't investigating the crime scene, there's a bunch of cute romantic moments between the two of them. Annalise is certainly the standout character, being cheerful, flirty, affectionate, and quite literally animated. Both in a good way and in the bad way, Annalise carries this visual novel. Our main character isn't anything too special, but thanks to Annalise's interaction, this murder mystery visual novel is a lot more lively and fun with her around, bouncy boobies included. Kimagure Temptation gets a B from me. Also, for a fun fact, Kimagure Temptation is written by the same author who wrote Nana Era Reincarnation, so if you've read that title, most likely you'll enjoy this one as well. Meanwhile, Asa Project is back at it again with yet another romance comedy visual novel in KoiKari Love for Hire, where all of our heroines are in desperate need to rent a fake boyfriend, all at the same time. If you've read Sankaku Renai, KoiKari is from those same developers. In other words, be prepared for a lot of crazy insanity. The constant back and forth bantering is this visual novel's strong suit, and paired with the absurdly off-the-wall dialogue, makes KoiKari an entertaining read for a lighthearted comedy. There's even some rare emotional moments that hit nicely. That said, KoiKari's humor might not be for everyone. The most standout point for me is that some of KoiKari's characters solely embody some of the worst, awful anime rom-com tropes to ever exist. Tsubaki's friend is nothing but a shit-faced alcoholic, Hasumi gets uncomfortably too close to the NTR line, and Konatsu and Chinatsu are probably the absolute worst garbage little sister heroines I've ever seen. With the exception of Hasumi, these quote-unquote quirky character traits make up 100% of their personalities, and are just not fun to sit through. KoiKari is a rom-com that embraces its anime tropes, both good and bad, so your mileage with this visual novel may vary. Side note, Emmy's my favorite. KoiKari Love for Hire gets a B from me. And now, time for something super sweet and romantically wholesome, as Marshmallow All the Way Home wins my heart as a definitive moe cake shop visual novel. However, that certainly didn't prepare me for how extra spicy hot it is. The Common Route is one of the best I've read in the rom-com genre, probably my favorite so far. Kanan and her cake shop is going through rough times, as she's the sole owner after her parents passed away. But after hiring our main character after picking him up from his cardboard box, together with her friends they attempt to make ends meet. It fully embraces the wholesome, comfy spirit of running a cake shop, and all of its heroines are dedicated to giving it their all to protect the place most precious to them. For it's not just a simple cake shop, but memories of Kanan's parents, their loyal customers, and a sign of their friendship. Sure, it's a bit cheesy, but when it's done right, those happy moments of victory are so emotionally gratifying. Meanwhile, in other areas of the visual novel, the cast dynamics are excellent and hilarious, the visuals are bright and vivid, and the facial expressions are absolutely perfect. But alas, the same can't be said about the whole visual novel. The heroine routes are weaker in comparison because, frankly, I want to say that 70% of it was entirely H scenes. Marshmallow's H scenes are a goddamn marathon to go through, each one after the other and incredibly long. If you thought regular H scenes are long enough, this visual novel takes the phrase "going at it all night" quite literally. There's also the fact that the main character suffers from being a dense idiot on a frustratingly irritating level. For some moe fans, they might not mind the issues. In that case, please read this one. But for those wanting more cake instead of lots of cream filling, God, I hope this metaphor makes sense, please be considerate of what you're getting yourself into. Marshmallow all the way home gets a B from me. Meteor World actor Badge and Dagger continues Detective Ruka's adventures in the 7th Republic, featuring the women that hate him the most.
死なないよう全力を出しなさい。
Badge and Dagger is the continuation of the main story, taking place after the epilogue of the first game, and with Ruka not pursuing any of the heroines. Instead, he's laser focused on taking down criminals to get closer to the cult leaders. He's even willing to cooperate with previous enemies to further his goal. But as practically everyone who's read a Kinugasa work expected, Badge and Dagger is not the final installment to the series, nor does its qualities improve at all. Meteor World actor, despite being an entertaining urban fantasy detective visual novel with one hell of a shitty yet interesting protagonists, have problems with unresolved plot elements and incomplete stories. So it's rather upsetting that the series didn't improve at all. In fact, it actually looks like it got worse in quality. The artwork looks unrefined and unpolished, the two heroine routes don't have the qualities or appropriate length of being called an actual route, and none of the prior outstanding plot elements besides the main story are addressed at all. The story does leave off on a mystery cliffhanger to prepare for what seems to be the final installment, but this volume does not leave me optimistic at all for the next one. Meteor World actor Badge and Dagger gets a C. To put it simply, Raging Loop is a psychological mystery thriller, one with interesting character personalities, supernatural superstitions, and looping time travel shenanigans. But the most intriguing part is that it's entirely based on the werewolf social party game. In Raging Loop, there are hidden werewolves among the villagers, and the humans have to find them before they kill everyone. Every day, the group comes together to discuss who are the suspects and hang them. Unfortunately, our main character Haruwaki gets himself trapped in the village's ritual and is likely the first to be executed. And he can't leave either, as every time he dies, he revives back in time until he solves the mystery. It's a great premise with tons of fascinating aspects to it. The werewolf discussions are engaging and thrilling to watch, and each loop becomes more complex and complicated than the one before it. The setting of Raging Loop is also the perfect stage for creating doubt and suspicion, being an isolated village with plenty of internal fuses ready to explode. And the characters are distinct and amusing in their own right, sometimes even feeling realistic at times, making you more attached to these troubled individuals. The only major flaw, in fact, Raging Loop's most infamous flaw, is that the story infodumps and awkwardly explains the solutions to its mysteries in its final chapter. Here, the pacing drags, and most of the explanations for why everything happens comes off feeling like a contrived and convenient answer. Despite that, however, Raging Loop is a fantastic and thrilling story that keeps getting better as you continue reading, to the point where I couldn't stop once things got really going. If you like visual novels like Higurashi or Umineko, this is one to check out. Raging Loop gets an A from me. Next up, an older visual novel, but a great infamous one. Introducing Cyanotype, the iconic horror masterpiece, where a mentally crippled individual commits vile acts of terror, all thanks to a cute anime girl, eldritch abomination beyond your worst fears. And is it as great as people recommend it to be, despite being traumatized after reading it? Absolutely yes. Written by Gen Urobuchi, Cyanotype tells Fuminori's journey as he deals with the distorted reality that he now lives accident after being hit in a car accident. He sees the world as a living hellscape full of nothing but slimy intestines and hideous monsters, the only exception being Saya, a young human girl he meets. At least, that's what we think she is. For as the perspective changes to Fuminori's friends, everything looks normal, showing us a glimpse of who, or rather what, Saya truly is. On the surface, it's a frankly horrific premise, even more so when you see Fuminori passionately making love to the monstrosity known as Saya, but it's also much deeper than what it lets on, because despite the horrific acts they commit, Saya no Uta attempts to make you care for them. The others see their actions as morally wrong, but Fuminori believes that what he's doing is perfectly fine. It's all a matter of perspective, and by the end, we'll have you think about who's truly in the right. That said, a huge part of whether or not you'll appreciate Saya no Uta just depends on how much you can empathize with Fuminori. That, and you aren't immediately turned off by its problematic content, censored or otherwise. Now, the story isn't the only thing that should be praised. The visual direction is very effective, the soundtrack greatly fits the mood, and the writing is concise and clear, especially for a roughly 6-hour visual novel. Very short, considering the normal length of a visual novel. Overall, Saya no Uta is a great horror visual novel that still stands up today as both beloved and very traumatizing, but still a fantastic story to read that I would highly recommend. An S for Saya no Uta. And now we have yet another visual novel I reviewed for No Nut November, arguably the most messed up visual novel on this list. And with this one, I suffered the most from reading this, both from a story standpoint and a financial standpoint. 90% of people out there will be disgusted by this title. This is only recommended to those with the utmost deranged tastes in fiction, or for those morbidly curious by its content, and frankly horrific bad endings. All 9 of them. Brought to you by the creator of Bible Black, Starless follows the story of a college boy accepting an offer from the Mamiya mansion, home to a very rich and well-endowed family. What he didn't realize is that becoming their servant also means pleasing all of the women in the household on many, many intimate levels. I know what you're thinking. It's just a porn parody scenario, but it's so much worse, having these sadistic mistresses force the servants in many repulsive scenarios. And frankly, that's about it. There is no meaningful story here. I could say something about its usage of power dynamics, but there's no commentary about it. All it serves is to have its characters just go at it. I don't recommend reading this. Starless gets a D from me. And now it's time to talk about a certain visual novel series, an epic fantasy visual novel x JRPG trilogy adventure with a lot of heart at the core of its story, the Utawarerumono series. Starting off with the first in the trilogy, Utawarerumono Prelude to the Fallen, the epic tale of the greatest dad in the world. Our main character Hakuolo wakes up without memories and an unremovable mask. He's picked up by a local girl with animal-like features and is nursed back to health. To repay her kindness, he decides to help out at her village, and for a while, everything is peaceful. But when disaster strikes, it's up to Hakuolo to pick up the mantle as their new leader. And what begins as a small act of rebellion against the feudal lords becomes the beginning to the birth of a brand new country to protect his loved ones. A big theme of Utawarerumono is the essence of family. You'll get to meet all sorts of people from different cultures and races, and through Hakuolo's natural charisma, he unites everyone underneath his banner. They aren't just supporters or work partners, but friends and family. You'll get to see plenty of moments of the cast having fun together, and you'll get easily attracted to these lovable characters. But those peaceful times can only exist because Hakuolo does his utmost best to protect his country, even if he's forced to go to war. Utawarerumono isn't just a wholesome fantasy slice-of-life visual novel with cute animal girls, but it's also a tactical turn-based RPG story about the consequences of war. You'll control your units around the battlefield, utilizing a variety of different combat options to defeat your enemies. That said, some notable downsides are that certain maps tend to drag, and there's still a limited availability of offensive options. Other particular comments is that most of the villains in Prelude to the Fallen are very one-dimensional in character. Despite that, however, Prelude to the Fallen is a grand yet wholesome story where even when it hits you with the unexpected plot twist about the very nature of the world itself, the characters are at the forefront of what really matters, because nothing is stronger than family. Utawarerumono Prelude to the Fallen gets a B from me, and it only goes up from here, as every aspect from Prelude to the Fallen is greatly improved in its next title, Mask of Deception. While Prelude to the Fallen has Hakuolo, a humble leader dedicated to protecting his family, in direct contrast, Mask of Deception has Haku, a drifting amnesiac ex lazy slacker extraordinaire. Waking up with amnesia, Haku is picked up by a traveling young girl. They set out to find a job for Haku, and he finds himself being scouted to become the right-hand man for the nation's top Imperial General. He begrudgingly agrees, and despite his attempts to get out of doing work, all of his achievements end up attracting the attention of high royalty and the military commanders around him. All he wanted to do was live the easy life, but as he soon finds out, a grand task awaits him, whether he likes it or not. With Mask of Deception, we are introduced to a brand new cast of characters in a brand new setting. A lot of emphasis is on its world building and getting to know the characters. From the sheltered Princess Rulutier, to the noble thief Nosuri, to the romance-seeking berserker Atsui, to many more, Haku's got a big responsibility as the leader of their ragtag team, and as the unfortunate center of attention of their comedy hijinks. He is the sole reason for Mask of Deception's lively, playful, and entertaining atmosphere. Now, I joke around about his misfortune, but Haku is still a very capable tactician on the battlefield. The gameplay is the same as Prelude to the Fallen, but it's largely improved. There's a lot more variety in your tactical options, from offering multiple offensive and healing actions to utilizing passive abilities. It's a lot more complex, but still simple to understand and execute. A drawback with this particular title is that the pacing is a lot slower in the beginning, spending time showing the cast hanging out, comedy and romance shenanigans included. And with the exception of Haku, the cast's character development is lacking as a result. But there's a reason why, as Mask of Deception is only one half of the full story, leaving you on a jaw-dropping cliffhanger, one that drastically changes the tone of the story. For in Utawarerumono, Mask of Truth, all the fun and games stop. Nothing could have prepared Haku and his group for the grave events to follow. And it's here where all of the characters go through their significant character development for the sake of their mission, including Haku, as he goes through the biggest forced transformation you'll ever see. This event is the most compelling aspect of Mask of Truth. Throughout the story, Haku will have to uphold a role completely opposite of his personality, being forced to take on the burden of responsibility. In every possible situation, his back is up against the wall. It's gripping to see how he deals with the consequences, especially against the most fearsome antagonist Utawarerumono has had to date. We might have spent a long time through Utawarerumono's initial games, but all of it is well worth it to create such a fantastic payoff in Mask of Truth. Even if Mask of Truth stumbles a little bit in its last arc due to poor villain foreshadowing, it's a wonderful hidden gem of a visual novel series. Mask of Deception gets an A, while Mask of Truth gets an S. Now, World End Syndrome is in an interesting position for the type of visual novel it is. A murder mystery high school dating simulator. And in a very unusual move, the story actually ignores the murders until the last two routes of the game, which is very odd. After the death of his sister, our main character moves to the coastal town of Mihate to escape his past. There, he tries to rebuild his life, and at first, everything is going fine for him. He meets lots of interesting people, he becomes part of a school club, and he spends time with his new friends. Until he and his friends end up dying on the last day of summer, encountering the worst possible ending. Then again, it's his fault for being as boring as possible. He's not very interesting to watch. Just in general, this visual novel has a lot of downtime. You'll spend time going to places and talking to the cast, but a lot of it is meaningless and dull filler. Another important aspect to consider is that while there is a supernatural folklore / murder mystery backdrop, World End Syndrome heavily emphasizes its romantic aspects instead. Unfortunately, the romance itself is pretty mediocre, including a lot of stereotypical anime rom-com tropes. I will give it credit though, as the ending is much better than I expected. Of course, reason being is because the story actually gets back to the main mystery. It's just a shame that most of the visual novel to get to that point is uninteresting. World End Syndrome gets the strongest C today. And now it's time for the lightning round of noteworthy visual novels released this year that I, unfortunately, didn't have time to cover. In a rare revival of the series, the entirety of the A Clockwork Leyline series has been finally released, as well as Hoshizora no Memorious Bandit sequel in Eternal Heart. Meanwhile, the legendary classic dating simulator gets a remake in Ryokusei Banging Summer. Have fun chasing love among Ryokusei's 14 unique heroines. Mystery visual novel fans, Uchikoshi fans specifically, will be excited to hear that the sequel of AI The Samyam Files Nirvana Initiative is available to read. But that's not the only mystery release, as the epilogue arcs to the Higurashi series in Higurashi When They Cry Ho Rei is also available. As for Key fans, the Summer Pockets Reflection Blue fan translation is fully complete, while the official version of Rewrite and the HD version of Planetarium is out available to purchase. For Mublove fans, Mublove Alternative Total Eclipse Remastered is now officially available in English for the first time. And finally, we've seen history being made in not one, but two miracles. First off, after a barrage of organized protesting, Chaos Head Noah has been brought over to the West on PC, overcoming its initial ban by Steam, something never before seen. Fans of science adventure titles like Steins Gate will want to check this one out, as it's the first title in the science adventure group of visual novels. That said, don't forget to apply the Committee of Zero additional patch. And lastly, the legendary visual novel from Kinoku Nasu of Type Moon, Mihoyo or Witch on the Holy Night has been translated into English and is available to purchase on console platforms. And now it's time to announce the category winners for Best Romance, Best Horror, Best Mystery, and my all-time personal favorite of 2022. Starting off with the category winner for Best Romance, featuring a visual novel that will not hesitate to put your heart through the ringer. The winner for Best Romance Visual Novel is Cyanotype Daydream. All throughout its individual stories, Cyanotype Daydream shows you the relationships between its lead duos, Arashima and Rin, Will and Olivia, and Kana and Sumomo. They may be different people, but all of them embody important qualities out of its primary lead couple, Kaito and Yanagi. Will and Olivia represents their strong sense of teamwork and ambition, working to overcome adversity together. Kana and Sumomo portrays their younger selves, full of motivating affirmations and pure-hearted ideals, and Arashima and Rin shows their close intimacy by how they confide in each other at their most vulnerable moments. It's a romance story that likes to challenge their love in many ways, case zero being the most hard-hitting. What do you do when your dreams and ambitions conflict with your lover's needs and desires? And when the very state of the world depends on that decision, what do you do? It's a very tough predicament. But no matter what the world throws at them, Kaito and Yanagi still remain firmly dedicated to each other through their powerful acts of love, even if they have to give their lives for the world in the process. And that's pretty damn romantic in every way possible. And now it's time for the best visual novel ready to traumatize you for life. The winner for Best Horror Visual Novel is Sayano-Uta. Sayano-Uta is an easy top contender. Between the Eldritch abomination that is Saya, to the horrifying acts that she commits, to the increasing insanity Fuminori goes through, this visual novel is a solid Lovecraftian-inspired horror. Execution-wise, it's excellent. You'll get to see how Saya terrorizes her victims, making them suffer a fate worse than death. All as Saya and Fuminori justify their actions while the ominous soundtrack plays in the background. It's clear, concise, and effective without overstaying its welcome. But the staying power with Sayano-Uta is in the twisted beauty in Saya and Fuminori's relationship, all formed out of their need for each other. Both of them are absolutely messed up, but to them, that's not the case. They were doing it out of pure love for each other. They don't believe that they're in the wrong, and Sayano-Uta wants to convince you of that. And that's horrifying to think about. But for those looking to stretch those brain muscles, you might want to check out this particular title. The winner for Best Mystery Visual Novel is Raging Loop. Now, despite the controversy surrounding the final reveal, something that makes it even more absurd for it to win Best Mystery, I would like to argue that the well-constructed foundation and the suspenseful events leading up to the reveal is still very good. Like the Rising Mist in Raging Loop, a lot of the details are obscured. The history and internal affairs of the isolated settlement, the specific details of the ritual itself, and how the looping mechanics fit into all of this. Haruaki has to figure out who the werewolves in the village are, but that doesn't mean that finding them solves his time looping phenomenon. The engaging werewolf section will keep you on the edge of your seat every step of the way, but you also have to keep in mind the bigger picture. Looping through Haruaki's lives will give you a better understanding of the villagers and the ritual details. The information you might get might not be useful in the current loop, but it might be important in another, and the game wants you to do this. It's a great interactive way of piecing together all of the clues of the mystery. While the reveals are sloppy and less engaging, I still can't discredit the thrilling experience I had beforehand. And to be honest, I actually don't mind those problems all too much personally. And lastly, the winner for my personal favorite visual novel of 2022 is Cyanotype Daydream, The Girl Who Dreamed the World. I feel like I've already praised a lot about this visual novel at length already, even more so for my quite lengthy review of it. But honestly, everything about Cyanotype Daydream is so well executed and it's just fantastic. The premises will hook you into these worlds and they are given shape through the characters you meet and the struggles they face. Despite Arashima facing scrutiny from his wife for his efforts, he picks back up the pen to write for the one person who wanted to read his writing. William Shakespeare may have started as a pub bartender turned slave, but through Olivia's determination, the both of them attempt a valiant effort through their theater plays to change history. And through Kana and Sumomo's summer vacation adventures, they're able to find their true selves and what they want to do in life. As much as this is an emotional drama romance that really pulls at your heart, it's also an uplifting tale about characters becoming the best possible person they can be thanks to the support of those who love you, all for the people that love you. It truly is an inspiring and romantic visual novel, one I would wholeheartedly recommend to read. And that's it for the year of 2022. If you made it to the end of this video, I would like to thank you for staying until the very end. Like I said before, if you want to know about a particular visual novel, all of their individual reviews are in the description down below. And as a brand new announcement, I've started a Patreon for those who want to further support me and my work here. Benefits include access to my full written reviews / scripts and spoiler notes about certain visual novels, access to delisted and extra content videos, a behind the scenes creator hub about how I run my channel here, and even your name in the credits of my videos as a very special supporter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.